Hi everybody, I'm Dan Pascucci and welcome to another exciting edition of Kitchen Sink TV, broadcasting here from the beautiful Easton Cable Access Studios in Easton, Mass. and beyond. We are absolutely worldwide if you wish. It is an absolute pleasure to be here, and as usual, if you want to correspond with this show in any way, shape, or form, the all-purpose way to get a hold of us is through the email account, and that's kitchensinktv@gmail.com. And if you look really carefully, it's right there in front of your screen. Look at that. Perfect. Every time. I love it. You can get us on our Facebook account, and that's facebook.com kitchensinktv. We have a Facebook page and all kinds of neat stuff. And then you can get us on Twitter, and that's the little @kitchensinktv on Twitter, and also you can catch us on the free Easton freeforums.org, and that's our blog site, as well as the patch. So how about that? And now they get all that. So if you want to get a hold of us for any way, anything at all, if you want to be part of this show in any way, shape, or form, recommend a guest, be a guest, have a question for our guests, thumbs up, thumbs down, happy birthday, pet your dog, weather reports, we are here for you. That said, we are here tonight for a very special show, and they're all special. This one's special in its own way, and that is, if you go back to time, we're going to do the Wayback Machine here, okay? Back to a time when radio really meant something to people. Radio really was. It wasn't so much a commercial, corporate entity, giant. Was geared solely to advertising. Radio actually goes back to a time when there was more to it. When the music and the current events came before the advertising. And in the Boston area, we were very fortunate to have a station for a long time, and it just recently signed off. WBCN. I'm sure most of you remember who it was. If you're over 35, you know who it was. If you're under 35, yeah, you still have an idea. But if you're over 35, you really know the meat and potatoes that started WBCN. Well, anyway, seeing how that BCN, as it existed on the radio on a regular dial, has come and gone, one of the longtime members of the BCN staff and current staff of WZLX, which kind of morphed, we'll go into that later, is Carter Allen. And now Carter has just written a book choreographing the whole scene of events at WBCN and the Rock of Boston, the rise and fall of WBCN. And this is his actual third book, but this is the one we want to talk about tonight. And so Carter Allen has actually taken time out of a very, very busy, very aggressive schedule. He's got a lot going on, and he hosts the morning slot, midday slot at ZLX right now, and he also hosts, and I want to talk to him about this later, the wildly popular, and many of you have heard this, Sunday Morning Blues on WBCN. Yep. And okay, I see there's people in the background cheering that. Well, if that's the case, right, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna get away from this. If look at this, we'll get that right on the camera there. Look at that, the Sunday Morning Blues. Okay, that's on it. It's on every Sunday from 9 till noon, and it is a fine program. So I'd like to introduce the one and only Mr. Carter Allen. Welcome.
Hey, nice to meet you.
How's it feel? Here. How's it feel if somebody else do some of the talking for a change?
I like it. I'm just sitting, relaxing. Go talk some more.
So yeah. So we've been discussing this book that you've written, and I actually have a copy here that I actually read, so I actually know what's going on, and I got to tell you, it brings back a lot of memories.
Thank you. Yeah, for a lot of people at the time, they don't remember as much.
Right.
Hopefully it fills in some of the gaps.
Oh yeah. So let's get right into this. This is like a terrific book, and I highly I urge everybody to get a copy. I actually had to wait for mine on Amazon because I pre-ordered it.
Right. It made you wait.
Well, that's what pre-order is all about.
Right.
It wasn't released.
Yeah, it was officially released on September 3rd. And I guess...
I ordered it in August.
Yeah. How much long did you have to wait? Like another...
It came out on the 3rd. I think I had it on the 5th.
Oh, that's not too bad.
No.
That's good.
And Amazon is funny because if you do something... I ordered another book, too. Right. And it says if you order them both together, you save on shipping.
Right.
And I said, okay, I'll order them both, save on shipping. they send me a note the next day. Well, you know, Carter Allen's book's not ready yet, so we'll send the other one. So now they send it twice anyways.
What happens is, a lot of times, since it's a new book, companies tend to be conservative with how many they order. They don't know how many it's going to sell or what the demand's going to be. So Amazon probably placed an order with the publisher, and they probably ordered low.
Yeah.
And that's why you had to wait a little while.
Well, that's good for you.
That is good. That's good news.
Yeah. So this is your third book.
It is, yes.
What were your first two?
First book was the U2 book,
Yep.
Outside is America, which I wrote completely by myself, and then approached publishers and managed to get a publisher interested.
Right.
But then I had to rewrite it, because then they hooked me up with an editor and they helped me, and that was a great experience. It's almost like taking a college course in writing. When you get hooked up with an editor at a publishing house, I mean, they put you through the ringer for all the good reasons. They really challenge you, and it made my writing better. So the second version of that book was much better, and it did very well. And it was actually published all around the world and sold about 100,000 copies.
Wow. Oh.
And then the second book was about Dinky Dawson, who was a sound man who worked for Fleetwood Mac and Jay Giles, and it didn't do anywhere near as well, but I thought it was a better book.
Well, that's good. And now, many of you don't know, a lot of you do, that in many ways Carter was responsible for introducing U2 to Boston.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I was just talking to somebody about this today. I mean, at WBCN, there were dozens and dozens of bands that would release new music that would come across my desk as music director, and even as just a jock, because the jocks used to always get all the CDs, well, all the records, excuse me.
Yeah.
It's happened all the time. But so many bands that you think have such great promise, you love their music, these guys are great. You know, after 2 albums they break up, or something happens, or they give up, or U2 happened to be one of those bands that when I heard them, I said, these guys are great. And the station, in an interesting sequence of events, got behind U2 in a big way, and that band stuck together and put in the hard work and wrote some great songs and went through some hard times and persevered. And you know, they're one of the biggest bands in the world now.
Right. No, they're very good.
But WBCN was the first radio station in America to play U2, and I was a lowly weekend DJ at the time, back in 1980. And what was cool about WBCN as a radio station was that I came in with this single of mine and said, I love this band, what do you think? And Jimmy Mack, who was the music director at the time, said, yeah, I think I like this too. These guys are all right. Go ahead, play it on your show. So I played it on the overnights, and pretty soon that airplay spread to the other day parts. It was getting played during the daytime, and you know, the rest is history.
Wow. Now, I'm sure you've been really busy today. I don't know if you've caught the news at all today.
I've been on the central artery.
Well, there was a clip on the news that it was just something they showed to make everybody laugh, and it was some event last night with former President Bill Clinton and Bono.
Yeah, Bono.
And Bono was imitating
Bill Clinton.
He nailed it.
Yeah.
I mean, he nailed it, and it was just the funniest thing. I mean,
well, if you're a U2 fan, I mean, back in '87 when they put out Joshua Tree, they were really interested in U.S. music and American music and blues music and country, and they were listening to Willie Nelson and Johnny Cash and all that stuff. And every once in a while, Bono, when he started talking about country music, he would go into that voice, And then they actually on a couple of occasions, they came out as an acoustic band and opened for themselves in concert. They called themselves the Dalton Brothers, and Bono would come out with that kind of Southern preacher type, guy voice, and so he's known that voice for a long time.
Wow!
And he knows Bill Clinton well enough to joke at him.
Oh yeah, you got to see it. Maybe after we're done here, the production show can show you on YouTube. But it is a riot.
I heard some audio. I haven't seen it.
He had him.
Yeah.
He had him nailed. It was just great. So let's get back to your book here now. Was this book your idea, or were you somehow deputized into doing it? Where, hey, Carter's written a few books. Well, I'll talk to him.
Well, in some ways, yeah. The reason I did write that U2 book, because that was the one that the publisher noticed. I was approached by the publisher, which almost never happens. usually you're out there trying to pitch a publisher on an idea, and there are ways to do that, and it's the typical way to do it, and it's hard. The publisher actually called me. The editor, Stephen Hull at University Press of New England, he was a fan of BCN. And when BCN went under in August '09, he just had it in his thoughts that, this would make a great book. And so he thought of calling me because I had been there for 19 years and I'd written this U2 book. So he knew that I could do it. But I turned him down, actually. I just was too much to do at WZLX. I just felt I was too busy. I didn't know if I really wanted to do it. But he kept at it. And my wife actually got involved, and she's the one that convinced me to. She said, you really should do it, because if you don't, someone who didn't work there will do it. And you know everybody. You'll be able to get interviews with everybody, And so I did.
Yeah.
And it took 3 years, but managed to do it.
That was a question, is how long did it take you to actually get all these people together?
Yeah, it took, in writing a book, the YouTube book took a year, and then I rewrote it. But when you write a book, as I discovered, when you write a book and you're interviewing all these people, it adds enormously to the amount of time, because there's over 100 interviews.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to find the people, then you have to pursue them and get the tape, get the thing recorded, and then transcribe it, and then move on, and then figure out how you're going to use that and what you
right, because just about, and I'm not giving away the ending here, but just about everything in the book that was said by somebody else was actually said in their words, which was great.
Well, that's the idea.
You got direct quotes from everybody, and because you weren't there at the very beginning.
Right.
Okay, you came in somewhat later.
I came in 1979, so the station had already been cranking for
11 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a whole different time. When I came in,
yeah.
It was punk rock and the whole bit. And when the station started, it was all, psychedelic and
right.
all those crazy acid stories.
My earliest memories are with Debbie Ullman.
Right, okay.
Okay, and the reason, and I was only a kid.
Right.
But I had an older brother and sister, and I was also a guy on my street, because my brother was over in Vietnam, and the guy up the street, for somehow reason, he was pretty close to draft age, but he was just kind of messing around him a little bit. But
right.
he had a car he was working on. He had the radio going. He had a big a van at the time, all painted up with all the the '60s stuff on it. So it was kind of cool to hang around with him.
Yeah.
And he'd have this on all the time. And I remember he had Debbie Ullman on it.
Right.
And it was like really weird, because we weren't used to hearing female folks on the radio.
Exactly. Yeah, she was one of the first female jocks on the air anywhere.
Right.
And in fact, in the book, she tells the story of how, because back in the day, you had to take a test to get a license to be on the radio. Now you don't have to. But back then, it was a pretty complex test. And the guy from the FCC, this is the old customs house down there down in Faneuil Hall. That's where you used to take your FCC test. They weren't used to seeing women at all in there. She said that he was pretty amazed when she walked in with the group to take the test, and he was really amazed that she aced the test.
Right.
So she was one of the first female jocks on the air. She did predate Maxanne, who is a much more well-known BCN.
Right, Maxanne Sartori, and now she's responsible for breaking Aerosmith to everybody.
That's true.
Because they were a local band,
right?
Okay, and they were. I remember they were like a house band down at the Surf Nantasket, which predated even Uncle Sam's.
Right.
And that was back, before Dream On.
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways, we just talked about U2 and me, having the freedom to, go ahead, play that U2 song, for better or for worse. It sounds good, go ahead. Well, Maxanne had the same freedom. She wanted to play Aerosmith, and she was into local rock, and a lot of the other jocks didn't like Aerosmith because they were more into the hippie culture. They liked, they were Jesse Colin Young and Youngbloods and Crosby, Stills and Nash and all that, which is not bad. That's good music, but they were more into that. And she was into rockin'. She was into the local scene. Some of those early Boston bands like Ready Teddy, and Willie Alexander.
Oh, yeah.
She loved, and Aerosmith was part of that, And so she was playing that, and she was allowed to play that. The program director didn't necessarily like Aerosmith, and Norm Weiner, who was the program director at the time, admits in the book that he thought Aerosmith was too derivative. they sounded too much like the Yardbirds, or they sounded too much like the Stones, or whatever. He's got a point. But time marches on. You have a new audience this is their band.
Right.
The Yardbirds might have been a previous generation's band. But he allowed her to play Aerosmith.
Wow.
And the audience responded. And within months, BCN was doing a live broadcast from Paul's Mall back in 1973.
Paul's Mall, there we go. Paul's Mall,
Yeah.
the Tea Party, I mean, all those
Sure.
places. A lot of people today have no idea what that stuff means.
No, some people, some Aerosmith fans, even young fans who get into that band and go back, like when I discovered, probably like you, when you discovered a band, you try to find everything you could by that.
Oh,
band.
yeah.
Because you
Rare earth.
Right. Well, Aerosmith, even if you got into Aerosmith now, you would trace them back, and you get back to that live bootleg album that they released. And there's 2 songs in there from the 1973 broadcast from Paul's Mall. So kids go, Paul's Mall, what was that? So, I mean, you can seek these things out and discover them for yourselves. But there was a whole culture back then, and things have moved on over time.
Right.
But Paul's Mall and Jazz Workshop and the Tea Party were early terminuses for a great scene in Boston.
Oh, yeah, there's a
Great
lot
stuff.
of bands broke out in
Yeah.
here. It's funny now, back to Aerosmith, really, because Steven Tyler wrote the foreword for your book.
Yeah, Steven Tyler, Joe Perry has a blurb on the back cover.
Yep.
Well, those guys love WBCN. I mean, Steven Tyler is never as big and famous as he's gotten. He's never been above admitting and loving the fact that BCN took a chance on him. Because if the station hadn't taken a chance, I mean, who knows? Aerosmith was a pretty great band. They might have found another way to success. But this is the way it happened, out of the city that birthed them. So it kind of makes sense.
Yep.
And Steven was wonderful and generous to do that. He's, certainly, he was doing this at the time when they were getting ready to release that latest album, There's Music from Another Dimension. So he had a lot on his plate. And so I really appreciate that. He said he'd do it, and he did it. And it's a great little forward.
Yeah, well, that's awful nice. And then a lot of people, and again, I got this one wrong when I was young and naive then, because I never thought they would be as big. I never thought Aerosmith would ever be as big as the J. Giles Band. Right? And Peter Wolf, the lead singer for the J. Giles Band, was actually one of the first actual on-air personalities at WBCN.
Yeah, you're right. He was the second on. Joe Rogers, Mississippi, was the first on, and then Peter Wolf.
Mississippi Harold Wilson.
Yeah, he was the first on. And 10 o'clock at night on the 15th of March, 1968, he did his 4 hours, and then Peter Wolf got on the air. And, he was already jiving on stage. He was in the Hallucinations and had played the Tea Party, was playing the Tea Party while he was the DJ. He would soon go on to discover the guys in the J. Giles Blues Band, which was trio out of Worcester. And so, obviously, then that would become J. Giles Band.
Right.
But for nearly a year, he was the overnight personality on BCN.
Yeah. And he's always come back, and he's always been loyal.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't know he was, he was asked to do this by Ray Reapin, who was an entrepreneur who originally thought of the concept of putting an underground radio station together in Boston. And Ray Reapin, he started the Tea Party, so he would see Peter Wolf on stage and thought, this guy might make a good DJ for this station I'm thinking
Plus,
about.
he had more records than anybody he ever knew.
That's right. And you know what? Peter Wolf, I have been lucky enough to be upstairs in Peter Wolf's place a couple of times, and he still has all those records. He doesn't have the Otis Redding reissues on CD. He's got the original vinyl, the original copies. And
Scratch to heck and...
No, just lovingly taken care of.
Really?
Well, the thing is, he's out on the road, for 9 months a year back then. So
yeah, that's true.
How messed up can you make your records if you're not home?
That's all. I meant from overplaying, just from playing them over and over.
The secret is, if he's a collector, and I'm a collector, and once you get past 1,000 records, they never scratch, because how many times are you going to get back to that record?
That's true. And a lot of people don't realize that WBCN, the actual WBCN signal and everything, started out as a classical music station.
Right.
And there was another station at the time called WJIB. They used to ring the bell.
Right, beautiful music.
Yeah. Right, Warren Schrover.
Right.
Okay, and then they decided on I'm not going to get into too many details. That's what you got to buy the book for. But they decided they were going to try and experiment and do a little underground radio, play different kind of music.
Right.
And again, at 10 o'clock on what night was it?
March 15th, 1968, the Ides of March.
They played a little something from Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
All right, The Mothers of Invention, and then they went right into Cream.
I Feel Free.
I Feel Free. Now, Charles Laquadera, the mainstay of the morning,
Yep.
he didn't start out that way. And I remember when he used to tell the story of how he got in the mornings. Mm-hmm. Okay, and it's in the book.
Right.
But a lot of this I remember because I was part of it. I mean, a lot of us were part of it. We hung on to what people on the radio said, and we listened to the radio. We listened to not just the music, but everything.
Yeah, people at BCN were not just talking heads. I mean, they always had something to say, and it was much more than the music. It was a difficult time. You know, the draft was on, the Vietnam War was raging. People were confused. A lot of people didn't want to go to Vietnam. I mean, I would say no one wanted to go to Vietnam.
No, nobody wanted to
go.
But,
a lot of...
Except for Arlo Guthrie. Right? Shrink. I want to kill.
I want to kill. But there was an informational station. It was kind of like the internet or the Facebook page of the time.
Yeah.
You know, you went to BCN to find out what was going on.
Right.
You know?
And the thing that was different is you didn't have typical AM style music where the DJ was just screaming into the mic, right, and pumping the station and playing, the Partridge Family and whatever, 15 times in a 4-hour slot.
Well, I played the Partridge Family once, but it was at the wrong speed, so that's okay.
There you go, and backwards, It said Paul is dead, right? But no, BCN plays all kinds of music. Now, you haven't heard this here yet, okay, but actually our intro music...
Yes.
Okay, our intro music actually comes from, and it's something that Charles used to play all the time, and it was typical BCN that they would play things that weren't just, Led Zeppelin, they weren't just, the Yardbirds, as you say. They would play all different kinds of music. They played classical music, they played jazz, and Charles every once in a while would get in the mood, play something, right? And he'd play compared to what?
Right. Okay.
Right.
You play
with
the
Les McCann and Eddie Harris, and I remember that all those years. And when I started doing this show, that is the music I chose to open and close the show with, and it was from listening to it with Charles on BCN.
Yeah, you didn't have the restrictions. I mean, I remember being on the air in the overnight once and. I played the entire Mountain Jam by the Allman Brothers Band, and then after that I went into Chuck Mangione, Land of Make Believe, which is another 15-minute song. I mean, that's an hour.
Right.
But the more important thing, it was the Allman Brothers going into a jazz piece, and it really made sense to me, and the listeners at night valued that.
Right.
And you got to do that during the daytime as well. It was a real hoot. I mean, sometimes when I was music director, like Mark Parenta would play Mato de Bango, Sol Makosa, and he'd play it every day. Sometimes he could play something too much, so we had to hide the record, which was easy enough when you have 15,000 albums in your library. We'll just put it down there in the Young Rascals section. I'll never find it.
I remember they had a contest on BCN. It was when AC/DC came out with Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. And the contest was you had to say the dirtiest deed done dirt cheap. And it was on Mark Parento's show. Right. And I remember very, very clearly what he said. He read the winning thing to himself, and he said, "You know what? I'll say anything on the radio." Because he would. And he he said, "I can't say this." And he said, "If you call up the listener line, we'll tell you what it says."
We'll tell you. That's pretty good.
But they had some great contests over the years, and it was just such a good time for so long, and there was always something for everybody.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the thing was that BCN went through a lot of changes. It went through a ton of changes before I even got there. It went through a lot of changes while I was there. But the thing that being on the inside, we were allowed, and Billy West, who was the voice maestro, who is now the Red M&M, and he said it well. He said it was a place where you were allowed to play.
Yeah.
You were allowed, in fact, you were encouraged to play. You were encouraged to have a good time. You were encouraged to challenge yourself and try new things. And, and that you could run it by someone. If they thought you were going overboard, they'd let you know.
Yeah.
But the key here is that the audience valued it. The audience allowed it to happen.
No.
And it wasn't such a it was sort of a mom and pop radio station where the bosses were like, well, we're making enough money. We're doing okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, have fun.
It wasn't on the later days in the book where it gets in, where Mel Karmazin comes in. It's just numbers driven. It was true free radio.
Right. I mean, the radio industry went the way of many industries in America in the last 15, 20 years. Corporations, and there's a higher bottom line that's required. But back then, it was almost like your old mom and pop radio, mom and pop record store. You know, the record store where you knew the guy and you could spend half a day in there. You know, a lot different than some of the, like they going to Walmart.
Right.
You know, it's a lot different than having just the top 100 CDs there. You know, it's a very different thing.
Yeah, the record store for me was always Leechmere at the time.
Leechmere?
Well, they had the best selection at the time, just because they didn't have strawberries and they didn't have popcorn and all these other places. They had department stores, and they had you had to, if you wanted to go to a record store, you had to go like to a bigger city. Because I'd grown up in Norwood, so that you had to go into Boston to Skippy White's or something like that.
Right.
And go get a record. But other than that, it was Leechmere was the biggest place for records.
Yeah, but even then, even in a mall store like that, or you had more of a selection and a bargain basement, a bargain bin that you could go through. Yeah, you could have fun doing that.
Yeah,
BCN was
look,
like
Dave
that.
Mason, $4.99.
There you go. Sure.
But, so, anyways, up through the years, though, I mean, this WBCN it started out, and they did more than just play music, and the DJs did more than just talk.
Right.
They talked about things that meant something to them.
Right.
Okay, and it goes back to Charles with the whole lawsuit with the Penn tax thing, and you're gonna read about all this. I know you're gonna go out and get the book, or else. Danny Schechter,
the
news dissector. This guy, he killed. I mean, he was just fantastic. He would not read the news. He would explain the news. And it wasn't really a slant. I mean, in general, we were all really liberal back then and, anti-establishment and everything. But he did such a quality job explaining the news. They'd talk about something that happened in Da Nang that day.
Right.
He'd get into the nuts and bolts of it and not the political aspect of it, but, this is what this means.
Right.
And he'd explain it in such a way, and I feel he never had enough time. But how much time he would take all of it if he could. I'm sure.
Well, we were talking about the music and the free-form nature of the music. I mean, the newscasts were the same way. The newscasts, could go on. They were supposed to go on at certain times in the evening, but they could go on an hour late or 15 minutes early. And there's supposed to be a certain amount of time. But if something serious was happening, if there was a demonstration down in the Common, and they had sound that somebody had gone down and gotten on a tape deck, that newscast might go a half an hour or more.
That actually did happen live.
Sure. Oh, yeah. So Danny was kind of the precursor in a lot of ways to some of the news magazines where you have a chance to go in depth, or 60 Minutes.
Right.
In a lot of ways, Danny Schechter was doing what 60 Minutes has been doing way back in in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, 1971.
1970,
yeah, 71. Yeah, because the war was going full tilt then.
Right.
And then another major event that anybody who listened to WBCN remembers is when John Lennon was assassinated.
Right.
And then that went just to non-commercial, and it was just I was actually working over at Wheelock College. Mm-hmm. At the time, so I was in the heart of the city when all this was going on, and you could just hear BCN everywhere.
Well, again, it's Oedipus was on the air that night, and it was December 1980, and when he got the news, I remember I was driving home from an Iggy Pop show. Iggy played the Paradise that night, and my girlfriend and I at the time were driving back to her place in the Metro West, and we heard Oedipus announce it on the air. We had to pull over. We had to pull our car over and just like.
It was like a JFK moment.
Yeah, totally. And it was a JFK moment for Oedipus, too. And so Oedipus is allowed to make the call. He says, I can't play commercials at a time like this. He said in the book, he's quoted as saying, commerce seems so meaningless. And so he made the decision as a DJ to not play commercials.
Right.
You can't do that now.
No.
You can't. And so he did get, within moments, because Tony Berardini, who was the program director at the time, was watching the Patriots play. That's when Howard Cosell made the announcement on network television. So he heard it on TV. He talked to Oedipus, and Oedipus told him, I don't want to run commercials.
Right.
And he said, you're right. Don't run any commercials. And so we just started playing Beatles and Lennon music, and that went for the whole next day, and then we assembled a special tribute to John Lennon. Danny Schechter, who was not at BCN at the time, but in New York, he actually contributed to that with his own amazing, poignant way, an editorializing of John Lennon's career and what he meant and how he is much more important than just being a musician. And it was just, an amazing day.
You guys, the station as a whole always had an unbelievable on-air staff.
Right. Yeah.
But you also had supporting cast members that were beyond. You talked about Billy West, right? Yeah. Ren and Stimpy. Yeah. Right? Is he Bugs Bunny now too? Or?
Yeah. He was Bugs Bunny, and he's got a percentage point on Spaceballs. So
all right.
He's the red M&M.
And Eddie Gorodetsky, who now he went on. He was a major player with 2.5 Men, The Big Bang Theory. Yeah. So and you had some, and then Tommy Hadges. Oh my God! You had so many people that were just beyond. Daryl Martini, the Cosmic Muffin.
And it's funny because these things, there's no mold, there's no pattern here. I mean, when they found Daryl Martini to be the do the astrology report, nobody was doing astrology reports.
No.
Charles happened to say that the moon was in Libra Virgo or something like that.
Mercury's in retrograde.
Right. So he called up and they worked that out. But you're right. There was a great supporting cast. There was the production. BCN always had great production. These fake commercials that they would do. Lunch songs.
The lunchtime. Some of my favorites. Right, was Stovetop Stuffing.
Okay.
That was a good one.
I liked Pink Floyd, Another Grilled Cow to Go.
Yeah, there you
Another Brick on the Wall.
Oh
good
boy.
Stuff.
Yeah, they were what they called the SWAT team at some point in time.
I don't remember that, but I was just going to say in that Another Grilled Cow to Go. Whenever, even today, when I play that on ZLX, I'll play Another Brick in the Wall. In my head, I can hear Another Grilled Cow to Go.
Well, I can't hear the Hollies anymore without thinking of Stovetop Stuffing.
There you go.
So they had, and they did. They had the lunchtime songs, and they had all the years with they had the big three.
Right.
All right, and that was Charles in the morning, Captain Ken Shelton, all right, and then Mark Parento in the afternoon. So they had all day covered by three bodies for years.
For years, well over a decade. And,
and it was great.
Yeah, in fact, with talent like that, you would expect that they would move on, that they would consider BCN to be a stepping stone. Say after 5 or 6 years of becoming really big and getting great ratings, that they would consider that to be a stepping stone to maybe going to New York or going national. Right. But they didn't. They preferred to stay in Boston.
Yeah.
It was always such a great station. It's hard to think of other places that might have been better. There are a couple of great stations. NEW was great. MMR in Philly was a great station. But XRT in Chicago, but BCN was always one of the greatest and a place you wanted to stay at just because it was so much fun.
Yeah. Oh, they had and it was fun to listen to. It was fun to be part of it because that was the other thing. You always felt like you were part of it, no matter where you were. If you were out in 495 somewhere or you were in the city, you were always part of it. Now, and then another thing they started doing was they started getting serious about sports.
Right.
And they had a gentleman they called Tank. Right?
Paul Svarutza.
Yeah. Now, he actually is the reason you're here tonight.
Oh, yeah? Really?
Did you not know that?
I did not know that.
Ah, see, Paul and I are friends. And he said, he gave me, that's why I contacted you so early about you. I think you may have been surprised I knew about this.
Right.
Because
you talked to Tank. Well, I didn't know that.
Aha!
Tank was my first listener line person.
Yeah,
did you know that?
Yes, I did, because it's in the book.
That's right.
I read it.
Yeah.
But Tank he's the reson you're here. Well, he tipped me off about this a long time ago.
Well, thank you, Tank.
Yeah. And actually, we invited him over tonight. He was unable to make it.
Right.
But he's always welcome. We wanted actually at one point in time, I tried to get him down here to do a show.
Well, Tank, is a great example too. Tank is a guy that started out in the listener line. I started out in the listener line, believe it or not. I mean, I answered phones for Tracy Roach. But there was opportunity there. And Tank, he started developing a personality that people noticed. And he became a van driver back when we first got a van. And then, he was really well versed in sports. And so he got some help. He started helping Charles on his show, doing some production, or rather producing for Charles, which when you're producing, you start out by getting coffee, and then you move to more, other things.
Yeah, other things.
And he did that. And then pretty soon he's getting on the air with Charles. They're calling, hey, Tank, get in here.
Yep.
What about that, the Sox last night? And he'd always know. He'd know the stats. He'd know the facts and figures. Pretty soon he's getting more airtime, until somebody finally figures out, maybe he should be doing a regular sports report. So then they start doing a regular sports report, and then Oedipus makes him sports director. So, this is how it could happen for you.
And this was before sports radio.
Exactly.
And Tank was actually
pioneer
of sports radio, because he another one that would explain everything, get into the nuts and bolts, and nobody knew more than him.
Well,
nobody. He was into it.
Sure. They'd get phone callers, and people would call up and go, "No, I think you're wrong about that," and they would debate, and he would have his figures pretty well straight.
Wow. So
and Scooter, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Judy Carlo, Scooter, she was a salesperson in the same way. She got to do sports as well because she knew sports.
Right.
And this is shortly after Tank was doing it, and this completely predates the women being in sports television and radio.
Right.
Because there are many women now in sports television and radio.
Yeah. They're all part of every NFL game now, every baseball game, hocky games.
The sidelines are anchoring.
Yeah.
She was one of the first, if not the first.
Wow. And it's just truly amazing how things started. If you really want to trace it back, and your book does a great job of bringing this back. Right. How hard was it to get a hold of all these people?
It would have been a lot harder, 10 years ago or 15 years ago. With the internet. Charles, back in 2009, BCN went out of business in August 2009, and in October there was a farewell party that Charles organized at the Paradise, and so there were 500 people there, former staff members, and it was just a great night. He gave me the database. So I had everybody's email. And those people that were not in the database, I just do a random search on Facebook.
Yeah.
I plug in their name, and 6 pictures would kick up, and I go, oh, there he is. Yeah. Like I found Sherman Whitman that way.
Yep.
I found a lot of people on Facebook.
I got to tell you a little story. One time, a whole bunch of us... We decided we all went to BCN one night when it was on the Prue,
right,
on the 50th floor, whatever it was, and then because we all wanted to see Lisa Traxler.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because everybody heard, she was new. And
so what'd you do? Did you go into Skywalk?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, and you're looking in?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Because we had the windows, people would look in like you were.
There was like a dozen of us. Yeah. We had to go see, yeah. And I remember she had the leather jacket on, the BCN leather jacket on. Yeah. I was like, whoa.
Yeah. It used to be kind of funny when there'd be like, a tour bus of Chinese tourists would come
That's
up.
What we looked like.
Well, 80 Chinese tourists looking in the window. You'd kind of have to, you get a little self-conscious, have to go hide for a while.
Wow. So anyway, you're well on your way with this book now. You're doing book signings.
Yeah, book signing. We had our big kickoff party for the book at Remy's, which was a lot of fun because it was 1265 Boylston Street, which is right next to Fenway, which was the location of BCN for 25 years.
Yeah.
So for me, I hadn't been back in the building since I left the station, so just being in the building was great. And my office, by the way, is where the bar is.
Oh, well, there you go.
Right where the vodka is was where my desk was. And so it was great being in there and having everybody gather. It was kind of like a repeat of, it was about 300 people came.
Yeah.
So we had a great time, and now we're doing book signings and we're doing interviews, and it's, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. Book signings seem like they'd be fun.
Yeah. You never know what's going to happen at a book signing. Sometimes, it can be a Spinal Tap moment. You're expecting, 50 or 60 people, and there's only 3 or 4 there, but it's still fun because now you have a smaller group and you just sort of do one-on-one and have a good time talking.
Well, later you could practice by signing my copy.
Oh, okay.
How's that?
Sure.
I even got a ceremonial pen and everything. Our wonderful director had this thing, had so many rubber bands on it. It took. I started, I think, Monday afternoon taking them off, but
well, I know I'll really have made it when there's like 6 of these next to each other.
Yeah.
I have to sign one book and then you have to sign another.
So these are a lot of fun. You're getting a lot of attention. I know you've been covered in the the Herald. You've been covered on with Dan Ray.
Yeah, we're just starting out. We're just getting going. There's a lot always going on in Boston, and so you kind of take your place. But BCN is fond in many people's hearts and minds, and people in the media. So I've been getting into all kinds of places without a whole lot of work.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Well, you got in here.
I know, and you were one of the first. It's great.
Well, yeah, that again, that's part of the BCN tradition, though. It's going to be ahead of the curve. And again, thanks to Tank for that, because he was all over that.
Yeah.
So you got some stuff coming up, though. You have.
Yeah, we have.
I got a schedule here. It looks like so. If there's nothing in Boston proper scheduled as of yet.
Not yet. We're working on a couple of ideas, but a lot of the bookstores. There's not as many bookstores as there used to be.
Well, no, we lost all the borders. It was like one in every town.
Yeah, and there's less mom and pop stores. There's a couple mom and pop stores I'm talking to, and Barnes and Noble. Several of them have reached out. We're reaching out to the Boston location and Newbury Comics, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I know Thursday, October 3rd,
right.
At 7 p.m., you are going to be at the Barnes and Noble bookstore in Walpole at the Walpole Mall. And that's a good Barnes and Noble store, and there's plenty of parking there because it is a mall, and it's nice if you want to go see them.
Well, the people there were very nice. They were very proactive.
Yeah.
They reached out. They wanted to do something right away, and I was like, of course.
That's my wife's bookstore of choice now.
Awesome.
So maybe you never know what happens. On Wednesday, October 16th at 7:30 p.m. a moderated conversation with Carter Allen. That's you. Okay, at Arlington High School in Arlington. And there's going to be information on that. And then you go on the Arlington Community Ed website and get all that information. On Friday the 18th, though, Barnes & Noble on 210 Andover Street in Peabody. And that's another mall. That's another great area there.
Up North Shore.
North Shore. So there's a little something. I'm sure you're going to have a bunch of other ones.
Yeah, we're working on there's a place called the Book Shack in Kingston. We're talking to them, looking at a November signing. And Salem, New Hampshire. We're talking to the Barnes & Noble up there, and we're still working on...
Too bad you can't do left on Spitbrook, right on Daniel Webster.
No, you can't do that anymore.
Those guys were like one of the original advertisers on BCN way back when they were only voices. Nobody knew who they were, and nobody only knew their first names, and nobody knew, nobody ever saw them, and It was a big secret. And
right. Yeah, Jordan's Furniture, Waltham. Yeah,
right.
And in fact, our good friend Tank talks about interviewing sports stars in the front window there. Talking to people in the front window there in Moody Street.
Well, I'm going to be the only guy that doesn't talk about what killed the station. What ultimately, because it's in the book.
Right.
It's been widely noted everywhere. And see, that's been the headline. Every time somebody talks about it, it's a 2-minute thing. Yep, and this is what happened.
Right.
There's so much more. You got to understand. If you were a fan of the radio back then, fan of BCN, get the book and read it. It takes you back. It just fills in a lot of blanks because there's a lot, and there was a lot of transition. People, when the music started changing, people started changing. I was one of them. I wasn't really a big punk rocker. Once they started playing the B-52s and things, I got away from that.
Right.
And I was also one of these people that thought Lisa Carlin was it, and
Well, it's 41 years. A lot of change in 41 years.
Yeah.
It was just a great ride.
And when you're in Walpole, you're dangerously close to Tom Doyle, who lives in Norwood, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, so you never know. He might.
Well, I don't know. He might be in bed already.
Yeah.
He's got to get up pretty early.
Yeah. And then, so when this book goes back and it talks about the radio stations, the metamorphosis of radio in Boston, all the different things. There was radio stations. Some of you younger people wouldn't know what WCOZ is.
Right.
And they were a major player. WVBF, which actually is, for all intents and purposes, WROR.
Right.
And it was amazing to find out that Ken Shelton, before he got in the radio, was cleaning up after Rex Trailer's horse.
That's right. Well, that's something I never knew.
No.
And that's the beauty of interviewing people. You can't get everything out of, getting on the internet and certainly going to the library. I mean, you can do that, and you should do that, but you need to talk to the people.
Right.
I mean, who knew that? Nobody knew that.
Right.
I mean, that Ken Shelton worked on Boomtown. Amazing.
Yeah, and Rex Trailer, God bless him. And now Captain Ken, we all went to a BCN concert. with Hall and Oates.
Right.
Okay. We
Went to Centrum?
No. It was right in Boston.
Uh-huh.
And we called it a Meatloaf Girl because nobody knew her name. It was Carla Bonoff, I believe. Carla, right?
Meatloaf Girl.
The Meatloaf Girl, right?
Right.
Yeah. And Captain Ken was the MC for the show. Yeah, he had his hat on, his captain's hat on.
Yeah,
It was great times, and it really brings you back to a time. And when you see these people, they don't realize, and I don't think they realize how much they really meant to people back then, and what people hung on their words, and couldn't wait for what was next, and it was really.
Yeah, well, there's a lot. It's a lot less button pushing. A lot less moving around from station to station. Like if you listen to BCN, you basically listened all day.
Yeah.
I mean, Ken Shelton. When he first showed up in Boston, he showed up in 1969 to go to graduate school. His deal was he wanted to stay in school so he didn't have to go into the Army.
Right.
And so in '69, when he got here, BCN was already underway, and he found BCN dialing up and down because, like everybody, you set up your stereo system first. He said he didn't listen to anything else.
Yeah, he was basically a voiceover guy on what was WBZFM at the time.
Exactly.
They didn't really have live DJs. It was just a recording that went on and on.
Yeah, his Captain Ken moniker goes back to his
Clark.
days.
Yeah,
it goes back to those days. He never quite used Captain Ken on BCN, but people always remember him as Captain Ken.
So that's good. And because they even did a lunchtime. They did a lot of lunchtime songs with him, right? Yep. Did a Beach Boys one.
Yeah. Well, I still remember the Beach Boys Christmas medley that they did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Merry Christmas, Boston. Whenever I hear that Beach Boys medley,
that's all I think of.
I hear the BCN.
Yeah.
Beach Boys Christmas song.
Oh, yeah. So anyways, I know you get a lot of things you got to get going, and we're going to have to be wrapping it up here soon because the people in the back are telling me. That's all right. It's Lionel out back. He's painting the bus. Don't worry about him.
They're running out of memory.
Yeah. No, but I'd like to actually, I'm not going to make you commit, but I'd like to have you come back and talk more. This has been a great, I could go another hour easily. I could go a day and bring back memories. And the more you talk, the more you remember.
Right.
And the more that I've been listening to you, and every time you say something, a little light bulb goes off.
Well, I had to cut 100 pages out of the book.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Oh. I mean, I wrote.
I guess it wouldn't fit in the thing. Yeah.
The publisher, they said, no, cut this, cut that, cut this, cut that. And I was like, okay. So there's a lot more to talk about. That's for sure.
Oh, well, that's good. So why don't we make plans to come back? Right. The door is always open, except when we're taping, then it's closed. And again, I would like to thank Mr. Carter Allen from ZLX.
Always fun.
And check him out because he is on during the day, believe it or not, from 10 to 2 every day on ZLX. And that's 100.7 on your dial. He also is Sunday Morning Blues. And I could do a whole show on that because that is like my favorite thing to listen to.
14 years now, over 14 years.
I love Sunday Morning Blues because you play such a great you have a playlist that is just unmatched.
Well, in a lot of ways, it's like the old BCN. There's no restrictions. They just let me play what I like.
Yeah.
And,
you've got I got to ask you. I'll ask you later. You have a cover version for a Jesus Is Just All Right With Me that you played every now and then, and it's like I can't. It's not the Doobie Brothers.
It sounds like Robert Randolph with Eric Clapton.
There you go.
Yep.
So, anyways, we got to get on out of here. Again, I'm Dan Pascucci. This is Kitchen Sink TV. If you want to get a hold of us. And then we can get a hold of Carter Allen, anything you want. The all-purpose way to get a hold of us is on our Gmail account, and that is kitchensinktv@gmail. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/kitchensinktv, Twitter @kitchensinktv. It's amazing. We are also on freeforums.org, and we are on the Patch and pretty much anywhere else. So we're going to wrap it up for now. Go out and get this book. Make an investment. You know what? Like Bill Cosby used to say, if you're not careful, you might just learn something. All right? And we'll be back next time. So thank you very much and have a good night.